The following is an excerpt on the inferior sensation of an introverted intuitive type from a book called Lectures on Jung's Typology. Written by psychologist Marie Von Franz, this book gives examples with real-life situations, along with conceptual content. In my opinion, this book is a hidden gem for those interested in personality types, and like myself, are armchair enthusiasts. As a quick synopsis, Von Franz talks about the typical focus and natural talent of an introverted, intuitive person. The natural focused attitude on intuitive perception, however, often leads to a neglect of sensing facts that has both positive and negative manifestations. Now let's begin with the excerpt originally written by Marie Von Franz from Lectures on Jung's Typology. The introverted intuitive type has the same capacity as the extroverted intuitive for smelling out the future, having the right guess or the right hunch about the not yet seen future possibilities of a situation. But his intuition is turned within, and therefore he is primarily the type of the religious prophet, of the seer. On a primitive level, he is the shaman who knows what the gods and the ghosts and the ancestral spirits are planning and who conveys their messages to the tribe. In psychological language, we should say that he knows about the slow processes that go on in the collective unconscious, the archetypal changes, and he communicates them to society. The prophets of the Old Testament, for instance, were people who, while the children of Israel were happily asleep, as the masses always are, from time to time told them what Yahweh's real intentions were, what he was doing now, and what he wanted his people to do. The people generally did not enjoy hearing these messages. Many introverted intuitives are to be found among artists and poets. They generally are artists who produce very archetypal and fantastic material, such as you find in Nietzsche's Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Gustav Meyrink's The Golem, or Alfred Kubin's The Other Side. This kind of visionary art is generally only understood by later generations, as a representation of what was going on in the collective unconscious at that time. The inferior sensation of this type also has difficulties in noticing the needs of the body and controlling its appetites. Swedenborg had a vision in which God himself told him he should not eat so much. He ate naturally, without the slightest self-discipline, and with complete unawareness. Swedenborg was a typical introverted intuitive, the prophet or seer type, and he was simply coarse and uninhibited about overeating. The introverted intuitive also suffers, as the extroverted intuitive does, from a tremendous vagueness where facts are concerned. As an illustration of the more ridiculous aspect of the inferior sensation of an introverted intuitive, I offer the following story. An introverted intuitive woman was present when I gave a lecture on early Greek philosophy and was terribly moved and impressed by it. Afterward, she asked me to give her private lessons on the subject of pre-Socratic philosophy, as she wanted to get deeper into this field. She invited me to tea and, as happens very often when you have to give lessons to introverted intuitives, she wasted the first hour in telling me how moved she was and what she conceived to be at the back of my mind, and what she believed we could do together, and so on. The second hour also got wasted in the same way, and as I felt I should earn my money and get her going somehow, I insisted we look at a book that I had brought and proceed in a systematic way. She agreed, but added that I must leave her alone. She had to do it quite her own way. I noticed that she was getting nervous. When I came for the next hour, she said she had found the best way to get into the problem, namely, that she could naturally not study Greek philosophy without knowing about the Greeks, and she could not know about the Greeks before knowing quite concretely about their country. So she had started to draw a map of Greece, and she showed me the map. It had taken a lot of time. With her inferior sensation, she had first had to buy paper and pencils and ink. That excited her enormously. She was absolutely in heaven about her achievement. She said that she could not yet go on with philosophy. She had first to finish the map. So by the next time she had coloured it. That went on for a few months, and then her intuition picked another theme, and we never got down to Greek philosophy. She left Zurich, and I did not see her again until about 15 years later. Then she told me a long story of how she was still impressed and moved by the lessons on Greek philosophy that I had given her, and all that she had gained from them. She had just drawn a map. She was a very extreme case of introverted intuition, but I must admit in looking back that I see what a really numinous thing it was for that woman to draw this map of Greece. For the first time, she had got in touch with her inferior sensation. The introverted intuitive is often so completely unaware of outer facts that his reports have to be treated with the greatest care. Though he does not lie consciously, he can tell the most appalling untruths, simply because he does not notice what is right under his nose. I very often distrust ghost reports, for instance, and reports about parapsychological facts for those reasons. Introverted intuitives are very much interested in such fields, but because of their weakness in observing facts and their lack of concentration on the external situation, they can tell you the most appalling nonsense and swear it is true. They pass by an absolutely amazing number of outer facts and just do not take them in. I remember, for instance, driving with an introverted intuitive type one autumn, and in the fields the potatoes were being dug up, and there were bonfires. I had noticed that for quite some time, and was enjoying the sight. Suddenly the driver stopped the car in horror, sniffed, and said, "Something is burning. Is it coming from outside?" We looked at the brakes, and everything was all right. Then we decided it was outside after all. It was the bonfires. The bonfires were everywhere, and to me it was obvious that the smell of burning came from them. But an introverted intuitive can drive for an hour through the country with such phenomena all about and not notice a thing. And then suddenly he will be struck by the fact and make completely incorrect deductions. His inferior sensation has the quality that all inferior functions have, namely that it comes up into consciousness in islands. Sometimes it functions, and then it disappears. Suddenly a smell is intensely realized, whereas 3/4 of an hour before it was not realized at all, but then suddenly it is taken in with great intensity. The inferior sensation of an introverted intuitive is extremely intense, but it breaks through only here and there, and then fades again from the field of awareness. The introverted intuitive has particular trouble in approaching sex, because it involves his inferior extraverted sensation. It is most tragically mirrored in the works of Nietzsche, for instance, where, towards the end of his career, shortly before he went insane, very coarse sexual allusions penetrate his poems and also appear in Thus Spoke Zarathustra. When he went insane, he apparently produced material of that kind, which was destroyed after his death because of its absolutely distasteful character. Inferior extroverted sensation in his case was very much connected with women and sex, in a completely concrete way, and he didn't know how to deal with the problem at all. The positive aspect of inferior extroverted sensation in the case of an introverted intuitive is to be found in an interesting way in the illumination experience of Jakob Böhme, a German mystic and an introverted intuitive type. He had a wife and 6 children for whom he never earned any money. He was in constant trouble with them because his wife always said that instead of writing books about God and fantasizing about the inner development of the Godhead, he would do better to see that his family had something to eat. He was absolutely crucified between these two poles of life. Now his greatest inner experience, a revelation of the Godhead upon which all his later writings are based, came from seeing a ray of light being reflected in a tin plate. That sensation experience snapped him into an inner ecstasy, and within a minute he saw, so to speak, the whole mystery of the Godhead. For years, he did nothing except slowly translate into discursive language what he had seen inwardly in 1 minute, in 1 second. His writing is so emotional and chaotic because he tried to describe this one experience in so many amplifications. But the actual vision was set in motion by seeing a ray of light striking a tin plate on his table. This implies extraverted sensation. An outer sensation fact started off the process of individuation in him. Here one can see, besides the inferior aspect of extraverted sensation, this strange character of wholeness, the mystical aspect which the inferior function often has. It is interesting that even Swedenborg's overeating connected him with the Godhead. His inferior sensation was connected with his deepest and greatest concern.